Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Antarctica, the frozen continent. Its hostile conditions and exotic marine life are legendary. For years, I've yearned to travel to the bottom of the Earth to see this magnificent frozen world for myself. And finally, I've done it. Getting from the United States all the way to Antarctica at the bottom of the Earth takes nearly a week, and it starts with a flight to Ushuaia, Argentina, at the tip of Tierra del Fuego. Often called the gateway to Antarctica, Ushuaia is a beautiful little coastal city in Patagonia at the base of a large mountain range. Many of the ships departing for Antarctica use Ushuaia as their port. Ushuaia is surrounded by a large national park. Rugged, craggy mountains tower above Ushuaia. They're beautiful, but of course, I'm more interested in the underwater scenery. So, I'm spending a day in Ushuaia to do a couple dives in the Beagle Channel. The Beagle Channel is a long, narrow passage of water protected by land on both sides. Well, we're finally going to go diving in Ushuaia, and I'm really excited to try to see something that they're famous for. You mostly see it in the restaurants downtown, but I want to see it alive, the giant king crab. Captain Carlos from Ushuaia Divers unties the boat from the dock, and we're on our way under a beautiful blue sky. It's summer here in the southern hemisphere, and even though Ushuaia is very far south, the air temperature regularly makes it into the 60-degree range, sometimes even the 70s. The water temperature is more like 45 degrees, about what I'm used to diving at home in New England. That means I'll be wearing my dry suit. Time to get ready. It keeps the water out with an airtight zipper like the one on a spacesuit. Unfortunately, the dry suit is quite buoyant from all the air inside, so I have to wear a lot of weight to submerge. My gear is cumbersome and heavy, but that's the price you pay to dive in cold water. All right, I'm ready. Let's go check it out!
That's a gate? Okay.
Underwater, the Beagle Channel is beautiful, filled with huge kelp forests stretching towards the surface. This kelp is a kind of fast-growing algae that can grow several feet in length every day. Swimming through the kelp is really fun. I feel like Indiana Jones exploring a wild jungle. The kelp can grow tall without a strong tree trunk because it floats, thanks to these little air pockets at the base of each leaf. The kelp is so thick, it blocks out the sun. As I look around the bottom, I see there are lots of other things growing here, like a variety of sponges encrusting this rock outcropping. But clearly, the Beagle Channel's most impressive animals are the crabs. Everywhere I look, crabs jump out of my way as I approach. Most of them are these little red crabs with a body about the size of a quarter. But there are also decorator crabs covered in camouflage, apparently willing to hunt the smaller crabs. And another crab climbing the kelp to safety. But at last I find what I came for, the crab that rules this patch of ocean, the king crab. Although they get much bigger than this, even this small one's quite a handful. After I put it down, the crab takes off through the seaweed on the bottom. Finally settling back to pose for my camera again. At the end of my dive, I surface from the land of the crabs and we enjoy a surface interval on a small island in the channel. The views of the surrounding area are beautiful.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
Patagonia is just gorgeous. As much as I've enjoyed Ushuaia, the following morning finds me rolling my gear down the dock for my departure to Antarctica. My home away from home, the Alexei Marashev, a 210-foot-long Russian research vessel with an ice-strengthened hull. I meet the staff of the ship, who luckily for me speak English quite well, and then it's time to board. I'll have plenty of time to put my gear together on the long run to Antarctica. A little later, they untie us from the dock, and it's time to embark on the trip of a lifetime. On our way down the Beagle Channel to open water, we pass a small rock island covered in South American sea lions. And then we pass the famous Beagle Channel Lighthouse. After leaving the Beagle Channel, we round Cape Horn into the Drake Passage and make our way more than 600 miles south until we reach the protection afforded by the end of the Antarctic Peninsula. Until then, we're at the mercy of some of the most violent and unpredictable seas in the world. From the bridge, the first officer drives the ship with a confidence that comes from many years of making this journey. Our progress is charted on a map by a GPS. So far, the weather has been mild and the seas calm.
The Drake Passage is considered the roughest section of water in the world, and boy, did we get lucky today.
Later, the fog closes in, but the sea remains calm. I have almost 3 days of this until we get there. Even my tiny cabin isn't too uncomfortable for a nap. The next day, the sun is out, but we still aren't there.
You know, 2.5 days is a long time to be sitting on a ship with nothing to do. But when we get to Antarctica, it's gonna be worth it.
With yet another day to go, I'm running out of things to do.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Wrong room. Wuka? Wanuka? Wahuka? Hello? Forget it.
last, land appears in the distance. We made it to Antarctica. The ship is covered in a fresh layer of snow, but the sun is trying to burn through the clouds. Icebergs float by. I can hardly believe my eyes. I'm actually here. And we don't waste any time. Our dive team starts suiting up for our first dive to explore the underwater world of Antarctica. Of course, I'm using my dry suit again, but this time instead of 45-degree water, I'm expecting 30-degree water. Our Zodiac goes over the side, and we're off with our dive master Jonas driving the boat. I'm really excited. I can't wait to get below the surface and start exploring. But first, I need my warmest dive gloves.
It's very interesting to do anything when you have gigantic, fat, cold water mitts on. Just putting on your dive computer takes about 10 minutes. All right.
I'm bundled up with my heaviest undergarments. I have so much insulation, I can barely move.
Well, I'm a long way from the Caribbean. I came all the way to Antarctica to go diving, and I guess I should have expected that there was going to be ice in the water. I'm assuming that means it's going to be pretty cold. I'll let you know. Oh yeah, that's a little chilly. Oh, baby.
I'm floating in an ocean filled with icebergs drifting by.
This water is below freezing. That's possible because it's salt water. This is fresh water, so the ice is frozen and floating in it. This water is so cold that if you fell into this water without a dry suit on, you could be dead in 5 minutes.
And that begs the question, what could possibly live in such cold water?
Well, let's go check it out.
My first glimpse of the underwater terrain reveals mostly just some seaweed on the bottom, flowing gently in the current. But a closer look reveals a community of bottom-dwelling invertebrates, including vast armies of limpets, snail-like animals with cone-shaped shells. They eat the algae on the rocks. A bright red sea star hunts down limpets for lunch. Nearby, anemones wait for prey, their stinging tentacles armed and ready for an unwary fish. A sea cucumber uses feathery branching arms to grab plankton out of the water to eat. But then, I look up from the bottom and something catches my eye. It's a Gentoo penguin swimming around with the grace of a dolphin and the speed of a torpedo. These birds might not be able to fly, but underwater they sure can swim. Their wings are adapted for providing underwater propulsion, and few animals in the ocean can swim with such grace and speed as a penguin. In the limited visibility, they're hard to film because I never know from which direction they'll swim. Just above the water on the beach, thousands of gentoos are warming up in the sun. A Gentoo penguin is easy to identify because of its bright red beak. Many of these gentoos are barely more than chicks, waiting patiently for their downy baby feathers to fall off. These poofy feathers keep them warm when they're little, but they're not good for swimming. I watch a group of young penguins practicing their swimming technique in a small tide pool. The tide pool offers protection from the open ocean, and it's a nice shallow spot to try swimming and hunting. Unfortunately, there's nothing here to eat, so foraging for food doesn't produce a meal. As the birds get older and their adult feathers grow in, they start gathering down by the ocean. Soon they take short hops into the freezing water to hunt in the shallows for krill and small invertebrates. It doesn't take long before they learn to swim like experts and take off to hunt together in groups. Penguins on the move porpoise in and out of the water like dolphins. But then they can hop right back up on land like no dolphin I've ever seen. Who needs to fly when you can swim like this? Soon we head back to the ship and pull anchor to move a few hours south. We're making our way towards the polar circle and passing some incredible scenery on the way. The next day, back in the Zodiacs, we head towards a shipwreck. The Governor was a whaling ship that caught fire in 1916, so the captain ran it aground to save the crew. I drop into the water to explore the southernmost shipwreck of my life. Although the bow is out of the water, the stern lies over 70 feet below. It's a long swim down the side of the hull to get to the stern. The hull is covered in patches of beautiful yellow finger sponges. I didn't realize that sponges like this could be found in such cold water. Looking closer at the sponges, I discover an Antarctic blenny resting there. Fish survive in this water because they have antifreeze in their blood that keeps it from freezing even when the water is below 32 degrees. Suddenly, a huge shape catches my eye. It's the biggest jelly I've ever seen in my life, swimming through the water with tentacles hanging down more than 50 feet. I swim over to investigate this massive animal, and the bell of the jelly is more than 2 feet across. As I rise towards the surface at the end of my dive, I encounter a huge wall of ice. It's an iceberg that drifted into the bay. The wall of the iceberg is covered in dimples like the ones on a golf ball. This pattern forms as the iceberg melts. Thousands of tiny bubbles are released from the melting ice as well, making the water near the iceberg look like a fizzy drink. The iceberg only rises a few feet above the surface, but it's more than 30 feet deep.
When you see an iceberg floating by, there's not that much above water sometimes, but that's because more than 90% of an iceberg is actually underwater. If I flip it over, you can see just how much ice there is. That's why icebergs are really dangerous to ships, because you can't see the part that's hidden underwater. fun with ice. Let me get my arm under it.
Getting the gear out of the water and into the Zodiac can be quite a challenge because of all the weight I have to carry. Heading back to the ship, we have a little time to unwind while we again change locations, heading even further south. We pass through the Lemaire Channel, filled with floating chunks of ice. I can hear them bouncing off the bow, and I'm glad that this ship has an ice-strengthened hull. The next morning, we're at it again, launching the Zodiacs over the side and preparing for another adventure. I carry my camera down to the boat, and we're off. Today, we're hunting quietly for a very special animal.
Jordy, this is Jonas.
And sure enough, we found them. Leopard seals sleeping on an iceberg. These animals, which reach 12 feet long, are the apex predators of the Antarctic. There are no sharks in the waters of Antarctica, but these seals fill that niche in the food chain.
Yeah, cool.
Soon, the leopard seals wake from their nap and come over to investigate us. They've been known to bite and deflate Zodiacs when they're being territorial. We watch carefully for a few minutes before we drop into the water with this animal. Leopard seals are big, aggressive, and have sharp teeth. But this one doesn't look aggressive at all. I must admit, I'm a little apprehensive as I prepare to roll into the water, but I'm also excited. I've wanted to film a leopard seal for a long time. The seal makes a few passes to check me out, but he seems a lot more curious than aggressive. I don't follow the seal at all, but hold my ground and keep the camera rolling. I let him come to me. Divers are not very common down here. This leopard seal has probably never seen a diver or a video camera before. Either he sees his reflection in the lens, or he's looking for a career in show business. Either way, this animal sure doesn't seem to mind my presence. The leopard seal is so curious that he stays around for more than an hour. I even have enough time to go get my still camera and take a few pictures. Look how big he is compared to me. It's a good thing he's in a good mood. Although leopard seals can hold their breath for an hour while diving, this one lounging with me near the surface regularly pops his nose above water for a breath.
That was such a great dive with that leopard seal. Man, it was so friendly. It stayed with me for over an hour. But I've been in this water for so long, my face is frozen.
With the circulation returning to my face, we head back to the ship, while I think of all the great things I saw in Antarctica, from the towering walls of a tremendous iceberg to a gigantic jelly. I saw incredible underwater acrobatics and astonishingly beautiful scenery. penguins nesting among the ancient bones of whales. And humpbacks feeding in some of the most beautiful bays I've ever seen. From the surprising color of the invertebrates living in the freezing water to the stark beauty of the frozen landscape, Antarctica is spectacular to behold. Soon, we must turn north for our long journey back to Ushuaia. As the sun sets on the passing ice, I have plenty of time to reminisce about my adventures. As we leave the protection of the Antarctic Peninsula, we discover the Drake Passage is not as kind as it was on the way down. But for that incredible hour I spent with a curious leopard seal, it's worth it. Antarctica might be cold, and the diving is hard work, but I'll never forget this magical place way down at the bottom of the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Everyone knows that the Bahamas have beautiful beaches and lush coral reefs, but they're also world-renowned for cave diving. And in the Bahamas, cave diving usually means blue holes. In particular, the island of Andros has dozens of blue holes clearly visible from the air.
Walking through the forest here on Andros, you can see that the forest floor is the remains of an ancient seabed. This limestone was formed by coral reefs millions of years ago.
Rain, combining with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, creates mild carbonic acid, otherwise known as acid rain, which slowly dissolves limestone.
Millions of years of rain falling on this rock and then draining in have slowly dissolved away the rock, creating these odd little crevices and holes, and it's made the whole floor of the forest look like a gigantic piece of Swiss cheese. Some of the holes have gotten pretty big. I mean, this one's the size of a hot tub. But in a few places, the holes are enormous and full of water. These are the blue holes.
It's easy to see how the blue holes got their name. Andros is covered in them. They look like circular ponds from the air and often lead into vast underwater cave systems. I've teamed up with Small Hope Bay Lodge and dive master Mike Hornby to explore the Guardian, one of the more famous blue holes on Andros. It's a hike through the brush to get there.
We have about a quarter of a mile. We're going to have to carry our gear in.
I gotta walk all the way in here in my full scuba gear?
Yep.
Oh man.
Well, we haven't got too far to go. We're just about ready to round the corner, and it's going to open up into a beautiful blue hole. Okay, Jonathan, here it is. This is the Guardian blue hole.
Wow. It doesn't look that blue.
If you look off in the distance there and you see that little bit of an archway,
yeah,
that is going to lead into one cave system, and right down here, this is the entrance into our other cave system.
So this is where we're going down
yes. Here. So the Guardian blue hole is the portal for the cave systems that lie underneath.
So I head back to get my camera.
This is a lot less convenient than boat diving.
It takes several trips to get my camera plus all the other gear to the water.
What I want to know is, Who was the first guy to discover this muddy hole and say, hey, this would be a great place to go for a dive? I mean, look at it.
Back at the truck, Mike and I start suiting up. We will walk in our gear to the water. Mike, as a cave diving instructor, will be my guide to exploring the blue hole.
Thank you.
Mike wears some specific gear for cave diving, including redundant dive computers, an extra regulator, and he will even be carrying a spare scuba tank.
So I'm not quite as technical as Mike, but I do have some specialized gear for cave diving. So I have a scuba tank. It's a normal scuba tank, but it has an H valve on it. It has two separate independent first stages. So I've got my normal regulator that I always use on the first one, and a completely separate redundant backup regulator on the other one. So that way I can turn one off, turn the other one on. If I were to have a problem with either one of my regulators, I have a completely secondary backup. For lighting, my lights on my camera, my huge video lights, those are my primary lights, but I have a flashlight in my pocket and a chemical light stick, which you break it, it glows, you have 12 hours of light, and it has no batteries. That's probably more light than I'm gonna need.
With all our gear assembled and ready, we hike into the brush, and man, is it hot! Nothing like a long walk in the hot Bahamian sun wearing full scuba gear and a wetsuit to burn off a few calories.
This water's going to feel extremely good after that warm walk through here.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Finally, it's time to jump into the water and explore the Guardian.
Oh, that feels so good.
Well, it's time to go check it out.
As I sink down into the yellowish green water, I can hardly see because it's so murky. I'm following Mike's pink fins. He specifically uses the brightest pink he can find so the people following behind can see him in limited visibility. Cameraman Tim is right behind me, bringing up the rear as we sink down into the dark, spooky hole in the ground. As we descend, we pass through layers of what looks like smoke in the water. Mike points out these clouds of suspended sediments to me as we keep sinking. The blue hole leads into a huge cave system, and it's a lot deeper than you might imagine. Periodically, Mike turns to make sure we're still here, and his flashlight illuminates a permanent guideline that previous divers have installed. This line guides the way out in case we get disoriented. The walls on each side of us go straight down. We're sinking into a deep crack. As we get deeper, the walls get closer together, but the water gets clearer. We've passed into seawater from the fresh water above. I can taste the salt on my lips. If we could go far enough, eventually we could reach the ocean. Mike points to ancient fossilized seashells embedded into the limestone. Here's a conch shell. Our bubbles are hitting the rock overhangs and knocking off sediment, which is raining down around us, reducing the visibility. I continue to follow Mike until finally at 150 feet deep, we reach some stalactites in a formation called candle wax. These were formed by dripping water during the last ice age when sea levels were much lower and this part of the cave was dry. Down below me, it's more than 500 feet deep in this cave. I don't think we'll be going down there. We turn around and start heading back, with Mike continuing to point out fossils. Following our guideline back into the shallower, murky water, Tim is right behind me. And Mike, with his spare scuba tank slung under his arm, is right ahead. Periodically, markers on the line point the way out. These can be used in the event of a light failure to feel your way to the surface. At last, we can see the dim glow of daylight from above as we ascend towards the sun. Back in the shallows of the blue hole, Mike shows me around. The bottom looks like it's sand, but it's actually a deep layer of silt. While Tim hovers high above the bottom to keep from kicking up silt, I perform a little experiment. Down on the bottom, I plunge my arm into the silt up to my shoulder, and it's even deeper than that. This is a layer of decomposing leaves and other organic stuff. The decomposition creates hydrogen sulfide, a deadly gas that smells like rotting eggs. The water is saturated with hydrogen sulfide, and I can smell it in the water that seeps around the edge of my mask.
Wow. Whew. That dive can only be described as spooky. The water is kind of colored like mustard, and you can't really see where you're going, and it's all swirly. And if I wasn't following Mike, I would have been totally lost. That dive was very spooky, but really interesting.
The next day, I'm out on the ocean, suiting up for another dive. Mike has something he wants me to see. After the last dive, I can't imagine what crazy thing he's thinking now. I roll into the water and follow Mike and his trademark pink fins down to the reef. Then we keep going down into a cavern below the reef. At the bottom of the cavern, Mike points to a hole and motions for me to go in ahead of him. Once again, it's pretty spooky, but exciting at the same time. So, in I go, with Tim and Mike right behind me. Inside, it opens up into a big cave. We're not deep enough for stalactites, though. As we come around a corner, I look straight up to see light coming in from above through a huge crack in the rock. We make our way right up the fissure into the blue above. I'm in an ocean blue hole, formed just like an inland blue hole 20,000 years ago during an ice age when the ocean levels were much lower. Once the ocean levels rose, this blue hole ended up underwater. But this blue hole connects through a vast labyrinth of caves to the inland blue holes. And as we emerge into the open ocean, something looks weird. When the tide goes out, all the water from inside the caves gets sucked out into the ocean, bringing with it silt and hydrogen sulfide from the inland blue holes. It forms clouds near the bottom with a distinct line between the clear ocean water above and the silty hydrogen sulfide layer below. What you're seeing here are the decomposing remains of forest vegetation which have passed entirely through the caves and out into the ocean. Everywhere I find what look like strands of mucus floating in the water. It's most likely mucus secreted by the coral in response to the caustic hydrogen sulfide. It's stuck on everything, including this gorgonian, which has closed all its polyps to protect itself from the hydrogen sulfide. As the tide carries the toxic water away, the corals will go back to normal. Finally, we head back to the boat. Tim and Mike hang onto the anchor line to do a short safety stop before we surface. My exploration of the guardian blue hole on Andros was both fascinating and a little spooky, but I have to admit, I'm intrigued. There are quite a few more blue holes on Andros for me to explore, so I'll be back.
The whale shark is the largest fish in the sea, and it would take an enormous aquarium to hold a whale shark. I'm here at the Georgia Aquarium, the largest aquarium in the world. They don't have a whale shark. They have 4.
The Georgia Aquarium is one of the world's most spectacular. It houses exhibits ranging from coral reefs to kelp forests, saltwater to freshwater, warm water to cold water, and just about everything in between. But there's no doubt that the 6.3 million gallon Ocean Voyager exhibit is the most impressive part of the Georgia Aquarium. It's as deep as a 3-story building, and the main viewing window is larger than a movie theater screen, creating a fantastic place to sit and watch the fish go by.
And that's named after a park in Taiwan.
I enjoy the bubble window where I can relax and watch the sharks. There's also a tunnel through the Ocean Voyager so people can walk underneath the marine life, which includes some of nature's most magnificent animals like manta rays and whale sharks. Keeping manta rays and whale sharks in captivity is difficult. First of all, these are huge animals. Mantas grow larger than a car, and whale sharks larger than a bus. So they need a lot of space. But they pose another interesting challenge as well. Both are filter feeders. In the wild, they strain their planktonic food by swimming with an open mouth and capturing small animals from the water on their gill rakers. In an aquarium, there's no plankton. Aquarists had to train the animals for hand feeding. To learn how they feed the mantas, I make my way to the top of the Ocean Voyager exhibit, a nearly football field-sized fish tank. There I meet Chris Coco, the curator of zoological operations.
We'll be staged here, and this is where you're going to jump and help us load the ladle.
He introduces me to biologists Christy Elo and Kelly Maples, the aquarists who are going to show me how to feed the mantas.
All right, this is Christy and Kelly.
Hi, nice
Jonathan
to meet
Bird.
you, Jonathan. Kelly, nice to meet you.
These 2 are the biologists up here that work the animals every day.
You guys are lucky.
The mantas are fed a combination of krill and small fish from a ladle. Since the mantas can't swim in place, they have to be fed while they swim by gently ladling the food out in front of their mouths.
Wow, fantastic. Here we go. We'll fill it up. About that much? That's good? Excellent.
After observing a few times, now it's my turn to try.
Okay, and then you just trickle it out.
Yeah, the key is to not dump it too soon. She's going to stick with you and stick with the ladle, so.
A little more, or then? I don't know, I'm a little nervous. There's all these people watching. I don't want to mess it up. I mean, it looks so easy, but I know it's not.
The one thing that we do ask, the one thing that it can be a little difficult when you get a little bit of water in as you go, try to keep the ladle out in front of her. She gets moving kind of fast, so it is possible to kind of hit her in the face with the ladle. So.
How's that? All right. Woo! Thank you very much. Thank you so much. That was cool. How many people get to do that? I got to feed a manta ray. That is so cool.
Feeding the whale sharks is even more complicated. It involves the aquarists using small boats to keep ahead of the moving whale sharks.
This is like a precision ballet of whale shark feeding. These ropes go all the way across the tank, and each aquarist has to pull themselves along in a boat, scooping out the food, staying just ahead of the whale shark. But what's really amazing is that each whale shark gets a different diet, so they're only feeding one particular shark. And the sharks are trained to only follow one particular boat. the best part about it is nobody bumps into each other. It's amazingly well orchestrated, and really, I can't imagine how long it took to train the sharks to do this.
While I get the bird's eye view of the feeding from above, the aquarium visitors get the fisheye view from below in the tunnel with the sharks feeding directly overhead. If feeding these animals looks a little complicated, imagine how hard it was to get them here. It all started in Taiwan, where the sharks are hunted for food. The Georgia Aquarium teamed up with a local fisherman to capture a live whale shark. Once they had it in a pen, they transferred it to a specially made sling. Then it was transferred into a custom tank with life support for an overseas flight. Finally, the shark was flown on a private charter across the Pacific all the way to Atlanta, where it was driven to the aquarium. It's quite a journey for a shark. Given how expensive and difficult it is to get whale sharks all the way to the Georgia Aquarium, the staff isn't taking any chances when it comes to their care. The rooms where food is prepared are nearly as clean as operating rooms. And the water quality is constantly monitored. I spend some time down in the pump room with John Masson, the assistant manager of life support.
John, this place is huge. Tell me about these pumps.
Well, here at the Georgia Aquarium, we have about 36 50 horsepower pumps on this side of the room, 34 25 horsepower pumps on the other side, which means we pump about 140,000 gallons a minute through this room, which is enough to turn over 6.3 million gallons in under an hour.
So you can pump the entire exhibit, 6.3 million gallons in 1 hour.
Yeah, actually we can. It's equivalent of one of these pumps can actually fill a swimming pool in about 15 minutes, which about 30,000 gallons. So each one does about 2,000 gallons.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
It is a lot of water.
I notice there's no leaks.
We try to minimize all of our leaks at least, yes.
Good plumbing.
Yeah, it's nice.
Now you might be wondering, if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and you want to have 6.3 million gallons of ocean water, what do? Well, Instant Ocean, gigantic bags of powdered sea salt and minerals. Mix it with fresh water, and you got ocean.
And I'm about ready to try diving in this inland ocean, so I head upstairs for my briefing with dive master Devin Fleming.
All right, so basically once we get done here, we're gonna get you guys set up in the locker rooms. We're gonna throw in the dock for you, move your gear down there. It is also basically valet diving. So once we get done with the briefing, you guys are gonna get changed and we're gonna head down to the dock. Just put your fins, your mask and gloves on. We'll get your gear put on for you guys, and then we're gonna ask you to do a forward roll into the water once your dive master's cleared you to go.
While I go and get my gear on, they put the dock in the water. They don't leave it in all the time because the animals might injure themselves on it. Now the moment I've been waiting for all day.
Oh, and look, they gave me a sign so I won't mistake my gear for anybody else's. You know what's interesting about this is they don't want to get any contaminants into the exhibit, so they don't even want us to use our own dive gear. We have to use wetsuits from the aquarium, BCs, regulators, everything. They were really nice though, and they let me use my own fins, but first we had to put them in disinfectant, so they are now extremely clean. Yeah, they won't hurt you at all. Did you go in?
Yes, stay in this water.
All right, let's go check it out.
All right.
There's a whale shark right under me. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Before I even have my camera, a whale shark swims silently right below the dock. It's hard to believe that I'm in a giant fish tank with a whale shark.
your favorite friends.
On the bottom, a great hammerhead comes over to check me out. I follow Devin down towards the deep end of the exhibit, and Tallulah, the manta ray, swims over to say hello. Soon I pass over the tunnel with lots of people inside. They're looking up at me, and I can't help but think how lucky I am to be able to do this dive. I wave to the kids and keep moving with Devin to the deep part of the exhibit. A whale shark with a school of jacks keeping him company swims over me. The whale sharks move around this huge tank in circles and figure eights. They're used to the divers and don't mind us at all. There's so much marine life in this exhibit that sometimes I forget I'm doing a dive in an aquarium. My camera moves from whale shark to great hammerhead. Then on to Nandi, the other manta ray, doing barrel rolls. Then, back to another hammerhead. Through the enormous viewing window, the crowd watches the action, a sand tiger shark passing right in front of the glass. The experience is almost overwhelming. It would take quite a few dives to get used to this. I just can't believe my eyes. There are so many fish. On the bottom, a sawfish catches my attention. This is a kind of ray with a saw-like nose for hunting prey. I've never even seen one of these in the wild, but they have nearly a dozen of them in this exhibit. One of the aquarium staff divers peacefully enjoys a sand tiger shark lazily drifting by. In spite of their fierce-looking teeth, these sharks are no threat to people. They eat smaller prey. Soon, my dive nears the end. On our way back to the shallow end of the exhibit, I pass once again over the tunnel with the people looking up. And Tallulah buzzes by again as if to bid me farewell. Devin gives me the signal to head up to the surface. It was such a short dive, I don't know if I can bring myself to getting out of the water.
I have never been on a dive with so many species of fish. I don't even know where to point my camera. I gotta go back in.
Maybe they won't notice if I stay just a little while longer. This is one dive I just don't want to end.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Goliath groupers. They're among the largest reef fish in the world. They used to be common throughout the Caribbean, but then their numbers started to plummet in the 1980s.
That's because everybody wants to catch an 800-pound fish. So pretty soon, the Goliath grouper had been fished almost to extinction. In 1990, the U.S. government had to take drastic measures to protect these fish, so they passed a law that banned all fishing of Goliath groupers. Now, 19 years later, they're making a remarkable comeback.
The Goliath grouper is still very rare. In fact, most divers have never even seen one. David Dubélé, the world-famous National Geographic magazine photographer, has invited me to join him and his wife, Jen Hayes, who's also his photo assistant, on a Goliath grouper filming expedition. How could I turn down an invitation like that? So I head down to beautiful West Palm Beach, Florida in September on a mission to see one of these magnificent fish in person. We board the Shearwater, a large dive boat that will be our base of operations for a week. I'm really excited as we pull away from the dock. Captain Jim Abernathy is taking us to a shipwreck where the groupers are known to hide. It's not far from the sprawling coastline of West Palm Beach. Since it's only a 10-minute ride to the first shipwreck where we'll be looking for Goliath groupers, I get right to work putting my gear together.
Great, we're gonna go find some Goliath groupers. Maybe they'll be bigger than me, which isn't really that hard, actually.
We've arrived at the wreck of the Mizpah, which sits on the seafloor 80 feet below. The question is, are there any Goliath groupers down there?
Well, let's go find out.
After I get in, David and Jen follow with their still cameras. My cameraman Pierre and I start descending to the wreck. Once we hit the bottom, Pierre and I will stay out of David and Jen's way. We're greeted by a very strong current. I can barely hold my place in the sand. We struggle to make our way to the wreck where the Goliath groupers like to hang out. Shipwrecks are magnets for fish. That's because they provide a great place for fish to hide and rest on what might otherwise be a very flat, featureless seafloor. The shipwrecks off the east coast of Florida have become some of the best places to find Goliath groupers, but a typical shipwreck only has one or two of them hanging around. Things are different here in September. That's when the Goliath groupers get together in large numbers to spawn. We're thrilled to find some big Goliath groupers. David is getting up close and personal with some big fish. And it looks like he's getting some good pictures too. The groupers don't like the current much either, so they hide behind the wreck the same way one might hide behind a large object to get out of the wind. An even better place to hide is inside the wreck. I make my way over to a doorway to have a peek into the dark interior. I can see a couple Goliath groupers in there. I swim inside to see if I can get some closer shots. They tolerate my presence until I get a little too close. Then they swim away, spooked by a diver in such close quarters with them. But outside, they let me get really close. These groupers are surrounded by little silvery fish called cigar minnows. The minnows might look like they're hiding out of the current, but they're really aggregating close to the groupers. What could they be up to? The Goliath groupers look like they're just hanging out, but they're waiting for something, just like the cigar minnows. Later, when the current relaxes, dozens of groupers are gathering together in the water column above the wreck. What's going on? It's the mating season, and these fish are preparing to spawn, probably at dusk or after sunset. Unfortunately, I'm low on air and I need to head back to the surface. Pierre and I do a safety stop on the anchor line as we eagerly anticipate the next dive.
That
That is incredible. Those fish are so huge. They're like the size of refrigerators. Unbelievable.
As the massive fish gather into groups for their evening spawning, I'm up above getting ready. I hope I don't miss anything.
These fish only spawn once a year, in September, during the full moon, at dusk. And they only do it for maybe 1 or 2 nights. We know they spawned last night, so this might be my last chance to film this.
So, as the sun gets low in the sky, Pierre and I jump back into the water. We head back down to the wreck. The Goliath groupers are all around the wreck in abundance. These groupers are so large that they don't need to worry about too many predators. With almost no current now, they head away from the protection of the wreck into open water. Clouds of cigar minnows stick to the groupers like glue, eagerly anticipating millions of delicious eggs that the groupers will release when they spawn. The medium-sized fish, called jacks, make runs at the cigar minnows to see if they can catch a meal. David is caught up in the action, photographing the cigar minnows surrounding the groupers. I keep looking for any kind of mating activity, but something totally unexpected catches my eye. It's a manta ray swimming among the groupers. I move in for a shot of the ray. It doesn't seem afraid of me. I have to believe it's no coincidence that a manta has shown up here. Mantas are filter feeders, and this one is probably hoping to join the cigar minnows and feed on some grouper eggs. The manta seems intrigued by our video lights, and she keeps coming over to me. So I put my camera down and give her a little belly rub. And then the manta swings around and says hi to Pierre. What a thrill for both of us! Any dive with a manta ray and fish the size of refrigerators is definitely a good day at the office. Mantas are awesome, but I need to keep my attention and my camera focused on the big groupers so I don't miss anything. The cigar minnows are crowding in even tighter to the groupers. You can hardly even tell there's a big fish in the middle of all that. It's an amazing spectacle to observe. These enormous fish would make Michael Jordan feel small, and the cigar minnows are just magical to watch. We see a lot of what looks like courting, but no spawning. Maybe the groupers are more bothered by our presence than they let on, or maybe they're just waiting until dark. But as it gets later and later, we're running out of light and air. Reluctantly, Pierre and I must head back to the surface. It looks like the spawning will happen later in the evening, and I'll miss it. Back aboard the boat, David and Jen are looking at their shots.
See that? That is really nice.
Even though we didn't see the actual spawning, the dive was still well worth the effort.
That was an incredible experience. Those fish are just majestic, covered with all those beautiful fish. We didn't actually see the spawning event. Not sure if they're maybe doing it now, but we finally had to come up. We ran out of time and it was really dark, but unbelievable. That was something I will never forget.
The Goliath grouper is a spectacular example of successful marine conservation. This vulnerable fish was pushed to the very brink of extinction, but was saved at the last minute by laws to protect them. In less than 20 years, they've made a strong comeback. And although their population has not yet fully recovered, they're well on their way. The Great Barrier Reef. It's probably the most famous reef in the world and the largest. It's not just visible from the air, but from space.
You know, it's hard to believe I've been diving for over 20 years and I've never seen the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. But today I've made it all the way to Cairns and I'm gonna get my chance.
Cairns is a city in Queensland, the northeast state of Australia. The Great Barrier Reef runs 1,600 miles along the coast of Queensland. It's made of millions of interconnected coral heads, forming the world's largest structure made by living organisms. To see the whole thing, you need to get pretty high up. This satellite image was made from 400 miles above the ocean. You can see the reef just offshore. For my first encounter on the Great Barrier Reef, I'll be making the trip out on a big catamaran operated by Sunlover Cruises. The crew unties the boat and I enjoy the scenery as we head offshore. "90 minutes later, I arrive at the Sunlover pontoon. I have never seen a dive operation like this before. The boat is huge, but we don't dive from the boat. Instead, we dock at this massive pontoon, sort of like a floating dive shop, and spend the day right next to the reef in a protected spot. Pure luxury. Time to check out the facilities.
You don't have to be a scuba diver to enjoy the Great Barrier Reef. The reef is so shallow, you can snorkel.
A lot of people who don't dive love to come out and get a first-hand look at the reef here. The water is clear and it's not too deep. But even people who don't like to get wet can see the reef on a submarine.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is the easy way to see the underwater world right here. Just relax, sit back, have a drink, watch the fish go by.
And for a diving experience unlike any other, anyone can try the Sea Walker experience. All you need is a 40-pound helmet. I walk down the stairs into the water and the staff outfits me with the strangest piece of dive gear I've ever used. With no fins on, I just walk out to a massive school of fish. My hair doesn't even get wet.
This is incredible. They've got about 1,000 fish around here. I feel like Dr. Sylvia Earle, deep sea diver. This is a very different way to go scuba diving. And this just goes to show you, if you don't want to wear a mask, and you don't want to wear a regulator, and maybe you can't even swim that well, you can do this. It's just like walking. You know, I've had a lot of experiences underwater, and this is definitely one of the most unique. To demonstrate how this helmet works, I have an ordinary water glass, which obviously is full of water. But if I turn it upside down, I can fill it with air. And now you can see that it keeps the air in. But if you turn it right side up, so we don't want to turn this right side up.
I pose for a picture because you never know when you're going to get to do this again. Next, I meet Vance Fahey, who will be my dive master for a scuba dive on the reef today.
Well, I can't wait. Let's get suited up.
Get right into it.
All right. Let's do it.
Not only do I have a nice easy staircase to walk right down into the water, but a platform for putting on my fins. I can get used to this. On the platform is a group of new divers getting their first taste of the underwater world. At last, I head out onto the reef to explore. I see many types of hard corals, beautiful pastel-colored soft corals, and lots of fan corals. Near the reef, I find one of the largest giant clams I've ever seen. I can't imagine how much this clam must weigh. The mantle gets its bright colors from embedded symbiotic algae that harvest the sun's rays for energy. I find a huge crack in the reef and have a little fun swimming through it. On the other end, I'm greeted by a sea turtle. She comes right over. There are lots of divers around this reef, and this turtle knows that the divers won't hurt her. Once she has decided that I'm not doing anything terribly interesting, she goes back to looking for her favorite sponges to eat. I turn and head back towards the platform across the shallow reef. At the platform, I'm greeted by a friendly Moray wrasse. This monster of a fish reaches both the length and the weight of a motorcycle. I'm just glad they prefer to eat crustaceans and mollusks, not divers. I think I've made a new friend. Unfortunately, I'm low on air and it's time to head back to my habitat up above. As we head back to the dock, I reflect on a fun-filled day. It's amazing how many things I did in one day on the reef.
Well, I finally did it. I got to see the Great Barrier Reef. And I discovered that of all the reefs I've visited, and let me tell you, that's a lot of reefs, the Great Barrier Reef is probably the most accessible for everybody from certified divers all the way to people that don't even like to swim. There's something for every age and experience level out here on the Barrier Reef.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to find some of the most amazingly camouflaged animals in the sea.
On a reef in the Pacific, a group of yellow-tailed blue damselfish hide near the coral, ready to duck into a hole at any moment. Between them all, watching and not moving a muscle, is a scorpion fish. His perfect camouflage is the result of skin that can change color to match the surroundings. The only thing that gives him away is the slight movement of his gills as he breathes. He's watching the damselfish. They're blissfully unaware of his presence. Soon, a damselfish comes too close. The scorpionfish is so confident in its camouflage that almost nothing can frighten it. Many animals in the ocean rely upon camouflage to hunt their prey or to avoid being eaten. This crocodile fish is so well camouflaged that divers rarely notice them. Even its eye has camouflage because a round black pupil would give it away. Like the crocodile fish, the frogfish is an ambush predator that hides using camouflage to look like a sponge with algae growing on it. It doesn't swim very much. Instead, it walks on its foot-like fins. It moves slowly so it doesn't give itself away. The frogfish is watching a group of tiny anthias waiting for one to come close enough to eat. The frogfish hasn't eaten in days, but no matter how hungry she is, she must wait patiently for prey to come to her. She watches and waits. It may be hours before she gets a meal. Later, as the sun sets, she's still waiting in the shadows, practically invisible to the Anthias. A frogfish has the fastest mouth on the reef. It can open its mouth so fast that it slurps up a fish in less than 1/60th of a second. That's literally the blink of an eye. Even in slow motion, the gulp is barely visible. Her camouflage has really paid off.
Although sometimes camouflage is about blending into the bottom, other times a creature evolves to mimic another creature. This is called mimicry. Come check out this fish.
On an Indonesian reef, I find a beautiful pink sea fan. At first glance, you would never suspect that it has tiny inhabitants. But closer inspection reveals a seahorse, no larger than my fingernail. It's a pygmy seahorse. The color and knobby bumps on the pygmy seahorse's skin perfectly mimic the appearance of the sea fan where it lives, a classic example of mimicry. They're only visible if they move. These animals live their entire lives in safety because they're nearly invisible to predators, and they never have to leave the safety of the sea fan because they feed on plankton drifting right by their home. Out on the sand, away from the reef, a pair of what are apparently leaves drift down current. But upon closer inspection, they're not leaves at all. They just look like them. They're robust ghost pipefish, mimicking harmless drifting leaves so they can float up and pluck shrimp from the bottom. The robust ghost pipefish almost perfectly mimics a piece of eelgrass. Its relative, the ornate ghost pipefish, has taken a different approach to camouflage. It mimics the appearance of a harmless and not very tasty feather star. This fish is a poor swimmer, but it doesn't have to swim well because potential predators just don't see it. The sandy seafloor has a surprising number of animals that hide by blending in, and few do it as well as the flounder. Except for its breathing, this flat fish is nearly invisible. With a quick rippling of its body, this flounder puts a thin layer of sand over itself and vanishes. Of course, blending into the bottom is one thing, but what about animals that live up in the water column? Can they be camouflaged too? Absolutely. Many open ocean fish are silvery in color. Why? So they reflect the color of the water around them. It doesn't make them invisible, but a lot harder to see, especially from further away. Many sharks have a form of camouflage known as countershading. The underside of a shark is white, while the top of the shark is darker. When seen from below, the shark's lighter coloring underneath helps it blend in with the lighter water above. When viewed from above, the darker dorsal surface of the shark makes it blend into the darker water below. Pretty clever, huh? Some animals have coloration that makes them stand out instead of blend in. For many fish, the brighter the coloration, the easier it is to attract a mate. And it would seem that finding a mate is more important for these king angelfish than avoiding predators. A regal angelfish takes this coloration to an extreme. This fish wants to be noticed. This long-nosed butterfly fish has a clever adaptation of color to help confuse predators. There's a black dot at the base of its tail called a false eye spot. Its real eye is obscured by dark coloration running right through it. This is meant to confuse predators. The nudibranch, also called a sea slug, has bright coloration that scientists call aposematic. These animals are basically snails without a shell. They might look like a tasty and defenseless little snack for a passing fish, but in fact, many nudibranchs secrete a toxic acid that makes them inedible to virtually anything on the reef. Its bright aposematic coloration is a warning to potential predators that says, "I don't taste good." Perhaps the most incredible coloration possessed by a sea creature is that of the octopus. An octopus can change colors. This octopus is moving from reef to rubble to sand. It changes color and skin patterns as it goes to blend in. There are almost as many camouflage and color schemes in the ocean as there are fish in the sea. I'm always amazed by the things I observe in the blue world, and fortunately, I get to see this stuff even though I'm not very camouflaged at all.